All right, grade 5. So we are going to begin our next unit. It has to do with measurement. Our big idea: objects have attributes such as length, area, perimeter, volume, or capacity that can be measured. Measurements of the same attribute can be compared. So keywords there, the same. Let me make that a little bit smaller so you can see it, the whole sentence. Keywords there, the same attribute. So an attribute like length can be compared from one shape to another. An attribute like area can be compared from one shape to the other. But you cannot compare things unless they are of the same attribute, the same thing. So when you have two objects and you are comparing them, you need to compare them using the same attribute. So both comparing area, both comparing perimeter, both comparing volume, both comparing length, etc. But you cannot compare length to area, for example. They're not the same thing. They're not really comparable. So our concept today is a couple of things, actually. Understanding how millimeters, centimeters, and meters relate, which we touched on in our last unit. Determining when to use millimeters, when to use centimeters, and when to use meters, which we haven't really discussed yet. And then how to estimate using a reference item for millimeters, centimeters, and meters. And we will talk about what a reference item is. You will find this in Unit 4, Lesson 1. Note, some things are from other sources, so you may not find them in your textbook. All right, so let's take a look at our first picture. We have some rulers here. One ruler shows centimeters. We've got 15 centimeters probably by the end here, 14 right up to that line. And this ruler shows millimeters. We are looking at length. And when we compare them for length, we can see that 14 centimeters is equal to 140 millimeters, because if we notice, there's 10 millimeters in each one of these centimeters. So 14 times 10 equals 140 millimeters. So how many millimeters are there in 1 centimeter? We've talked about this last unit. 10 millimeters is equal to 1 centimeter. Now, you can use millimeters to measure the length, width, or height and thickness of very small objects. It's used for small objects. It's a very small unit. A dime is about 1 millimeter thick. That makes a dime, or the thickness of the dime, this part here, the thickness of the dime, a good referent. Okay? A referent is something that is used to estimate a measurement. So the edge of a dime can be used to show approximately 1 millimeter. It is a good referent for a millimeter. Now, centimeters and millimeters are related. We've already talked about that. There are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter. The referent for 1 centimeter is the width of your little finger. Careful, the width is the distance across. So if this were my little finger, okay, I'll draw my little nail there. The width is the distance across from one side to the other. That would be the width. That's usually approximately 1 centimeter. So the width of your little finger is about 1 centimeter. It is a referent that you can use to estimate with. We've also touched on this. If we know that there's 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter, that also means that 1 millimeter is 1/10 of a centimeter. 1/10 is a fraction, or 1/10 as a decimal, doesn't matter. It's about 1/10 of a centimeter. Comparing meters and centimeters, they're also related. We've also talked about this in our last unit. There are 100 centimeters in 1 meter. That then also means that 1 centimeter is 1/100th of a meter in fraction form or decimal form. As far as reference for a meter, a referent for a meter is the width of a classroom door. So the width of a doorway generally is about a meter. Depending on your foot size, 3 feet, 3 of my feet, probably 4 of some of your feet if they're smaller, is also a good referent for a meter. Often from the tip of your fingertips with your arm outstretched to the shoulder blade of the other arm is also a good reference. So if this were my person, excuse my artwork here, here's this arm with the fingertips at the end there, and here's this shoulder. The distance from this hand or that fingertip to the shoulder is usually about a meter as well. We'll try some of those in the classroom so you can see, is that really the case or is it not? But a standard measure, something that's standard, would be the width of a classroom door. Now when we create a referent, we want it to be something that's a standard size. Okay, that's why we pick the edge of a dime. All edges of dimes are about the same. All doorways are about the same when we're talking about doorways. So when we choose a referent, we want to choose something that's a standard item. Example for a meter, the width of a stove is often approximately a meter. That again is a fairly standard item. Continuing here, we have millimeters, and meters are also related. We also know that there are 1,000 millimeters in 1 meter. So, using this, we're going to estimate some lengths. We're going to convert some lengths. All right, so here we have an example. We have a pine needle here. Its length is about 6 centimeters long. If we look and we notice going right past it, it's about, oh, I didn't draw it quite right. Hard to draw with that iPad pen again. It's about 6.2 centimeters long, which we know is also 62 millimeters long because there's 10 millimeters in each one of these centimeters. Okay, so we can read it as 6 centimeters long, and to be more precise, we would read it in millimeters as 62 millimeters long, or 6.2 centimeters long. Remembering an estimate is when you make an approximate calculation or a reasonable guess. So we would estimate this to be about 6 centimeters. About 6 centimeters. That would be our estimate. Our actual then would be 6.2 centimeters long. Length, which we've talked about a fair bit here, is the distance along the edge of a shape, or in this case along the edge of each line. Now, you're going to try to practice estimating and measuring. So estimating, I would like you to estimate in centimeters using the width of your pinky finger. Okay, so remember, this is my pinky finger, that's my little nail there. This is my width of my pinky finger, so it should stay flat. You're going to try to estimate the length of each line, and then you're going to try to do the same thing with your ruler. Now, I know this is on your iPad, so press pause and try your best. Or just note that it might not be completely accurate depending on whether or not you've enlarged your screen or whatever. Go ahead and press pause and just give it a try now. Alright, so for our first line, it is about 3 pinkies wide, so 3 centimeters for our estimate. And then with our ruler, for our actual, it is actually 2.5 centimeters. Now for a second line, which is very short, it's less than 1 pinky for me. So I'm going to go 0.5 of a pinky for my estimate. And then for the actual, it is actually 0.5 centimeters. So it would be, those would be both the same. For the next one, I get about 7 pinkies, so 7 centimeters would be my estimate. My actual, making sure I've lined up my ruler correctly, hoping that I haven't enlarged my screen at all. I have 6.2 centimeters. That's my actual. The next one looks like it's a whole pinky, so 1 centimeter for the estimate. And actual, it's a little bit less than that. It's 0.7 by the looks of things for the actual. E, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5 pinkies, so that's my estimate. Actual, 4.8. And the last one, I've got 9 as my estimate. And my actual is 8. So our estimates are fairly close. Now we're going to talk a little bit about reference units. What reference unit might you use to measure in millimeters or centimeters? And a referent, again, remember, is those things that we would use to estimate. So again, for a millimeter, a good referent is the edge of a dime. For a centimeter, the good referent is the width of your finger. Okay. Oops. Of your pinky finger. And a good referent for a meter, here they've given us a different one, is the height of a doorknob, which is kind of handy as well. That's a good one to take a look at. And before we had the width of a doorway is approximately a meter. So there you go, you've got a couple of those. So knowing that, which unit would be most appropriate for each and which reference unit would be most appropriate for each. So if we were looking at the length of guitar, a regular guitar, what do you think you would use? If we were looking at the height of a cupcake, an actual cupcake, not a mini one, a real one, what would we use? If you were looking at the length of the fin of a fish, and assume this is one of those tropical fishes that you would find in your tank at home, it's not a big fish out in a lake. So think about those, press pause and determine which reference unit you would use and which unit you would use for each. All right, so the length of a guitar might be measured in meters. Oops. And so then your reference would be the height of a doorknob or the width of a door. Possibly centimeters, but more likely meters. A cupcake. The height of a cupcake is probably going to be centimeters. Could be millimeters, but centimeters is your better choice. And again, then your referent would be the width of your smallest finger, of your pinky finger. The fish fin of a tropical fish would be millimeters, and then would be the thickness of a dime. All right, we did touch on this on our last unit, converting units and how they relate to each other. Remember, there are 2 ways that you can do this. You can either use the rhyme. King Henry doesn't usually drink chocolate milk. And remember, this can also be used for grams and liters. That's why it's unit here, because it can be meters, it can be grams, it can be liters. Kilo, hecta, deca, the unit, meters, grams, or liters. deci, centi, milli. Okay. Or you can remember what you need to remember about certain units, that 1 meter has 100 centimeters, has 1,000 millimeters, that there are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter, that 1 kilometer is equal to 1,000 meters, which makes it 100,000 centimeters, which makes it a million millimeters. All right, so we're going to try a couple here. We're going to try these 3 together, and then you're going to do these ones. Okay, so here we've got 3 meters to centimeters. I am going to use the rhyme for this one. Okay, so meters to centimeters is 1, 2 jumps to the right. So 3 is in the ones place. I know my decimal is right after that. I'm going to make it have 2 jumps to the right. There's my new decimal. I don't have that decimal there anymore. And I fill it with zeros. So it would be then 300 centimeters. Meters to millimeters. I'm going to use what I know about units in order for this one. If I know that 1 meter has 100 centimeters and there's 10 centimeters in 1 millimeter, that means there's 1,000 millimeters in 1 meter. So then 3 times 1,000 would equal 3,000. So there's 3,000 millimeters in 3 meters. Kilometers to meters, I'm going to use my rhyme again. I'm going to change my color here. Kilometers to meters, 1, 2, 3 jumps to the left. Again, I have 4 here. My decimal is after the ones place. And I'm jumping 3 to the left, to the right, 3 to the right. 1, 2, 3. Here's my new decimal. Get rid of that one. Fill this in with zeros, so it would be 4,000 meters. Now you're going to press pause and you're going to practice with these ones. As always, I do want to see some evidence of work. So be it that you show the rhyme, be it that you show the multiplication, what it is that you did to get there, whatever it might be, do make sure that you show that as well. All right, let's take a look at these that you use to practice. Again, it doesn't matter what strategy you use, just use the one that works best for you, either the rhyme or understanding the relationship between the units. 5 meters to centimeters, whoops. For that one, I'm going to use my relationship about the units. Meters to centimeters, I know there's 100 centimeters in a meter. So I'm going to multiply 5 times 100, which would equal 500. So it would be 500 centimeters. Millimeters to centimeters, I'm going to use the rhyme. Millimeters to centimeters, I'm going 1 jump to the right now. If I have 20, the zero is in the ones place. That means my decimal is here to begin with. I'm going 1 jump to the right. That means it's now going to become 2 decimal 0, or it can just be 2. I can drop that 0. I don't need it. Kilometers to centimeters, I'm going to use the rhyme as well for that one. Kilometers to centimeters is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jumps to the right. Again, I have my 2, my decimal is after that because it's in the ones place. My decimal is always after the ones place. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 jumps to the right. Here's my new decimal, and I cross out that one. I fill it in with zeros. So then I have 2 zeros, 3 more zeros, so 200,000 centimeters. All right, let's take a look at the bottom ones. We have millimeters to centimeters. Well, I know that there are 10 millimeters in 1 centimeter, and it's getting smaller now, so I'm actually going to have to divide. So I'm going to go 600 divided by 10, which really means I'm just dropping a 0, so it's 60. So it would be 60 centimeters. Meters to millimeters. I'm going to use my rhyme. 1, 2, 3 jumps to the right. got 8. It's in the ones place. Here's my decimal. 1, 2, 3 jumps to the right. Here's my new decimal. Add those zeros in. 8,000, which makes sense because I know there's 1,000 millimeters in a meter. So 8,000. And 900 centimeters to meters. Well, I'm going to use my relationship here. I know there's 100 centimeters in 1 meter, so I'm going to have to divide by 100 here, which means I'm taking off 2 zeros, so it's just going to be 9 meters. All right, you are moving on to your concept practice now. It's going to be 2 pages. We're doing relating units and unit conversion, which is page 124, 125. Oh, not 2 pages, sorry. Different questions, I guess. I'm not sure why I arranged them that way. Regardless. 124 and 125, numbers 3, 4, 5, and 12, which will have to do with unit conversion. Reference units, so remember using the edge of a dime, the width of your pinky finger, the height of a doorknob, etc., and determining which units are appropriate. So should I be measuring this using centimeters? Should I be measuring this using meters? What would be the best choice? Is also page 124 and 125. Questions 6, 10, 14, and 16. Remember, as you're working, if at any point you have any questions, please ask. Also remember, as always, you must show work as evidence of your understanding. So show work, please. Once you have finished your concept practice, I'd like you to try to do one of these reflect prompts. We continue to work on being able to explain something. So here are your 2 prompts that you can use. You can use whichever one you prefer. But remember to explain why, explain how, be as specific as you can. And then if you have some time, you can work on an open question here. Again, you can choose whichever question you would like. Either one is perfectly fine. And lastly, here is our exit slip. Make sure that you hand in your paper. If you've lost your paper copy, here is the electronic version.